Hey guys, today we're going to talk about Pretreat. I'm going to show you my Pretreat system as well as how I do everything when I'm using my Pretreat sprayer, so stay tuned. I'm going to show you guys every step that I use for my Pretreat, from setting up my Pretreat machine all the way to drying the Pretreat, and then all the little steps in between, including some tips and tricks, so make sure to stay tuned for those. For the Pretreat system, I am going to be using the Ecofreen Mr. T2. This is a great Pretreat machine. I know it's a little bit pricier than some of the other ones, but it has a lot of the features that I was looking for when purchasing a Pretreat machine. I'm going to quickly go over why I bought this Pretreat machine. Before this, I had a different Pretreat machine that had a knob. It was just a little bit difficult to dial in the amount of Pretreat I'm using, so the main reason I actually purchased this Pretreat machine is because of the digital display here. It allows you to better fine-tune and dial in the amount of Pretreat that you're using. Also too, when you do future jobs or if you come back to a job, you can always remember exactly which one. It does have some preset settings and you can set these yourself as well. I usually don't use that, neither do I use the cost setting. The main reason I got it was the digital display. An additional feature is they have a bunch of different Pretreat things you can have on the side. Typically you would, I'd assume, have one with distilled water and then the other three with different Pretreat liquids. However, I have these two with distilled water. This one is actually the FBX Universal Gen 3, and then I've never really used FBX Vivid on this machine, and if you watch my previous video, you know why, because I do my light color shirts and white shirts a little bit differently, so I will eventually remove that and probably just replace it either with a second Universal or just with distilled water. Another nice feature about this Pretreat machine is because it is enclosed, all of the excess overspray stays inside the machine itself, and then you are able to easily open it up, have a lot of light here to clean it out, and you know, over time it is going to build up, so you do want to make sure you flush it out whenever you're done using it. Additionally, you can quickly remove these nozzles to get them clean, and I'll show you guys my setup on that here. For the most part, I leave these hand tight so I can quickly go in there and pull that off. Essentially, it comes with the nozzle bit itself and the nut to retain it, and then this model has two nozzles, so I make sure to grab both of them. And this is something I'll do either before I start pre-treating or after I'm done, just to make sure that nozzles are clear. But I would take them. They do have a little bit of pre-treat on them, and so it's dripping through my hand there. But in my bathroom down here, what I keep is I keep this ultrasonic cleaner, which I use to essentially put in the Pretreat nozzle, turn that on, and I like to max out the time. It only goes to 480, and I'll let that sit for a little bit. Basically, as a solution, I just have some Simple Green in there, and after about a minute or so, that helps to clear up the nozzles, make sure you don't have any streaking with your Pretreat. So while those are in there, making sure the nozzles are cleared up and I don't have any clogging and I don't have any streaking when I do pre-treat, I'm going to go ahead and show you my heat press setup and the settings that I use for that. So first and foremost, I have the Stahl's Hotronix Fusion IQ. This is a phenomenal heat press. Alternatively, I would recommend something that has an auto pop. That's the only feature that this doesn't have, but it does have everything else I need, including both a swing away and a pull out option. That way, when I load garments, it's just significantly easier. But the one thing, like I said, is when the time does run out, instead of popping open automatically, it'll just buzz at me. So it's just a small thing that I have to do manually. It's not a big deal. As for the settings, I really only keep two settings on this machine. One for when I'm doing transfers, and one which is just a 360-degree temperature. With that, I have it at, again, 360 degrees, and I have it for 60 seconds, and I adjust this 60 seconds depending on what I'm doing. So again, since it's not an auto pop, I can pop it early at 15-second increments or after a minute and a half. For pre-treating, typically the time that I'll be using is 15 seconds. I'll be pushing it down at 60 and then popping it open at 45. Somewhere between 10 and 15 seconds. For the pressure, that depends on what you're doing. If you pre-treat correctly, or at least for my process, I don't have to crank this down. I used to have to go up to like a 7 or 8 to make sure the fibers are flat, but since then I've changed my process a little bit, and now I can do it at about a 2 or 3, and I don't have to worry about fibers sticking up. All right, so it's been running for a bit. Like I said, I usually only set it for about a minute or so. Honestly, if you're not going to print for a while, you can just let them sit, the nozzles sit in there, but Simple Green is a great solution to kind of get rid of all that pre-treat. Next thing I do here is turn on the faucet, take this out because it does have a nice little basket strainer, and then give it a quick rinse. And then I'm going to see if I can do this with one hand. Normally I would throw it in this towel here to dry it off. I'm going to keep them a little wet. It doesn't matter too much, but now that we have these done, we can get out of there. And all we have to do is put these back on. So these aren't really marked left or right, so it doesn't really matter, at least that I know of, which side they go on. The main thing you want to do with these is to make sure that the nozzles are parallel to, or I guess perpendicular to shirt, depends on how you look at it. That way you're getting a nice even spray, and I'll bring the camera over here in a second. I just need both hands here. And for the most part, I kind of just eyeball it, and again, I hand crank them down. If I zoom you guys back out here, but essentially this is what I'm talking about, making sure that it is even. So this one looks pretty good. It could probably turn just a bit. And then again, the other one looks pretty flat like this. So you just don't want that spray pattern to be a little bit crooked or anything, that's all. Otherwise, that is good to go. Okay, and then next thing that we're gonna do once we have everything set up, I've had the heat press on for a while, I have the pre-treat machine ready to go, is we need to get the shirts ready. First thing I like to do is basically get this pressed, typically about 10 seconds at the 320 degrees. That should be enough to get any of the moisture out, flatten out the fibers a little bit. And before I do all that, I do like to go ahead and lint roll just to get any of these extra fibers or fluffs or whatever off of there. Most of the time, I prefer to actually thread on just because of the style of garments and the way it's made. It's easier and better for me to get it squared up if I just lay it on top. That way I can kind of feel the edges a little bit better. Again, I'm just gonna hit that for 10 seconds. For these shirts, I am using LA Apparel shirts. They're the 1801 garment dyed option. They're fantastic shirts. They are a heavier weight shirt, so you do have to add a little bit more pre-treat. I'm gonna move you guys real quick, but when I bring this over there, I'll show you guys the settings that I use for this machine, as well as how many grams or milliliters I use of pre-treat for this shirt. And I know these numbers are approximations, but for me, I know they're pretty close. I'm gonna go ahead and get you guys relocated, and then we'll get the shirt loaded up onto the pre-treat machine. Again, it's very important to keep it all squared here because where you are pre-treating, you want to make sure it covers the area that you're going to be printing on. One trick I like to use, and it's a little bit faded now, but essentially when you do hit it with the heat press, you are going to get a slight edge or a slight color change on the garment itself. You can use that, if assuming that you got it all squared up on the heat press, you can use that square to kind of line it up with the platen. As for the settings, I have this at about a 19 with a round trip. So if we look at this 19 accidentally hit the power button, but this 19 essentially correlates with this number on top here. So we're looking at a little less than 20, and again at a round trip. So we're looking at about 28, 29 milliliters of pre-treat. This is typically where I'm going to be at with these LA Apparels. Maybe sometimes I bump it up to 30, and then sometimes I'll drop it down for a lot lighter things. For this shirt, I've kind of played around with it, and 19 with a round trip works for me, and again, that's about 28 milliliters. Can be a little bit confusing, but once you get the hang of it, it's not too bad. For now, everything is good to go. Again, we got the nozzle cleared up, and we have everything dialed with the settings, so I can simply hit start, and it should spray. So like that, we have a nice consistent spray of pre-treat. One thing that I like to do next, which helps get the fibers down and push the pre-treat in a little bit more, is I use just one of these 4-inch foam rollers and simply brush the pre-treat down in the same direction. You can also use a paintbrush, but these rollers work as well. This again just kind of gets the pre-treat into the shirts and as well pushes the fibers down a little bit. So I'm gonna need both hands for this, but once I'm there, I can simply take the shirt back over to the pre-treat, and I'll show you what I do simply to avoid the pre-treat box. But let me get you posted up on this tripod real quick. So we have the shirt lined up there. The best way to get it squared up, again, if you're keeping everything square throughout this whole process, it should be pretty straightforward where the edge is, and you can get that lined up perfectly with the edge of your heat press. Next thing I like to do is I run one of these parchment sheets and I place on top. You don't necessarily need to have one of these, especially for me since I do have a Teflon cover on the top platen. But I do like to use it just so I don't have to worry about the pre-treat carrying over on the top platen and then having issues when I'm curing the ink because I'll be using the same thing to cure. With that, I get this over, same settings like I said, 320 degrees Fahrenheit. The first press I'll do about 10 to 15 seconds and you should see a lot of steam come out. But what I like to do is every 10 to 15 seconds, pop it open, flip the parchment paper, allow the steam to leave, and then repress it. And then I continue to do that in cycles until it is completely dry, and then I know it is good to go. So here, obviously we still have a lot of moisture in there, and you can see a lot of the steam leaving. I like to give it a second to air out. And then I will go ahead and rinse and repeat until this is completely dry. All right, so if you were counting, that was about, I think, 4 presses. Typically, I'll get it dried in about 3 or 4. It takes a little bit of time because you do have to go and open it up in between presses, but this is the way I've found works the best to prevent any DTG boxes or prevent as much discoloration as possible. Now, it might be a little bit difficult to see. I do have a little bit of discoloration. Most of the time, if you get the Pretreat dialed in, that is going to be from the heat press. So if you let it sit, as I've already had these pre-treated, you can see the crease where obviously the fibers are more flat here versus here, but there is no discoloration from the Pretreat, and these are already good to go. If you do this process and you are having issues with discoloration, if it's actually turning yellow, then I would definitely say dial back the Pretreat or use a lesser dilution of Pretreat. For the Firebird Universal, I don't have to mix it or anything, but if you are using something like the Epson Pretreat or a concentrated Pretreat like Creek, you'll definitely have to do some extra testing to get the Pretreat amount dialed in. With all that being said, this is pretty much the whole entire process. This is good to go. When I am printing a bunch of shirts, what I do like to do is use the first one as kind of a test one. This Pretreat should be good to go, but I like to make sure and pay attention to the first layer. The first layer of white should be extremely opaque, and then when you put the color on top, that's going to really make the colors pop. Once you get this process down, I guarantee you'll be seeing great results, and I know this is often where people struggle. I know this because this is where I struggled, and that's why I worked on the Pretreat system with legit prints, and that still works for me wonderfully. Sometimes it makes more sense just to kick on the Pretreat machine to do a couple one-sided shirts instead of fully saturating the shirt with Pretreat. It's great for me to have those options. If you only have this, I would definitely say you want to get it locked down. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this video. Hopefully maybe you found it entertaining, but at the very least, I hope you guys have a great day. Let me know if you have any questions down below. I'd be more than happy to answer them. Otherwise, take care. So I realize I'm going to put this part after the outro. So honestly, if you've stayed this far, either you're very interested or you're bored. But either way, I appreciate you guys for staying this far into the video. If you haven't already, like the video and subscribe. But the reason I'm doing this outro, second outro, is mainly because I wanted to demonstrate printing on that shirt that I pre-treated, kind of as a proof of concept. Because I realize a lot of times people, they show the process, but they don't actually show doing it, or they just cut it off at this point, and I don't want to do that to you guys. So here I am printing these designs. I already have one printed, and this is the final result. This is a sample for one of my customers here, and you can see how I have all the bright colors. That is, again, due to better pre-treat. And the way I know I have good pre-treat is this is the first layer that printed. This isn't a double white. This is simply just one layer of white, and it is incredibly solid and opaque throughout the entire image. Another tip, just while I'm here, I do have an extremely long dry time in between the white and the CMYK. This helps me get the better vivid colors, and sometimes, usually with the reds, I'll have blending. If I print it too quick and I do the white and then the red, it will bleed through, so I'll have a little bit of white poking through. 60 seconds is usually good. I do it for about 75 seconds. That's just what works for me. It is a little bit slower, but I get a better print, and that's a trade-off I'm willing to take every day. Hopefully this video helps you with the pre-treat process. If you are having trouble with it, like I said, reach out to me. I was at a point where I wanted to just sell my DTG setup because I wasn't able to get good prints. And thankfully, I was able to meet a few people that was able to help me get over that learning curve. And honestly, once you're over the hump, it just becomes so much easier. You start making more money because you're spending less on wasted materials, wasted ink, wasted shirts, whatever. So if you are struggling, just reach out to me, leave a comment in the description below. I try my best to respond to those as soon as possible. Here's the second outro. I hope you guys have a good one, and I hope you guys take care. Bye.